and welcome to the MKG podcast, the podcast that helps marketers grow their business using the 4 M's, the right means, messaging, media, and measurement. I'm your host, Carrie Gard, and to help me introduce today's guest, I have one of our SEO experts, Christian Bullock. Christian, thank you for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on this one, Christian, because 7 years ago, if you could believe it, 7 years ago, Mike and I turned to you and said, Christian, you're amazing. How on earth do we clone you? And your response was?
Well, I kind of have a clone.
I have a twin brother.
Yeah.
And sure enough, we actually hired Adam Bullock as well. And it was amazing because it's true, though, like when you're creating a team and you find a really great hire, like Mike and I did, it's, how do we find more of those people? And, as you grow, that gets harder. Obviously, you only have one twin, unless you're a triplet. You didn't tell me.
Oh, sorry.
And so there's this interesting idea of, well, how do you pass on your knowledge then? And how do you grow a team when you can't actually clone a person? And today's guest actually has an interesting product that helps you do that. So in terms of training, Christian, what's your experience in passing on your knowledge and helping grow not just the MKG team, which you've certainly had a hand in, but even in previous experiences?
Yeah. Well, it's really tricky, especially when you're in kind of like a small business setting, a small team, right? Because you have less time to pass on the knowledge because you have to get all this other stuff done, right? So I've explored a bunch of different ways of trying it, whether it's reviewing someone's work, marking it up, traditional, like I'm going to take something and redline it and pass it back to you, kind of like what we had in middle school, high school, right, where you got your paper back and you were graded and the reasoning why, which I think is fine in some instances, but in some instances it isn't, because it doesn't really show what the grader's mentality was of why they thought this answer was incorrect. So, like I mentioned, I've tried doing it that way. I've tried, setting up some process documentation to kind of get some people on the right path. You think if you can get someone halfway there with a really well thought out document that explains some instructions, people can take those instructions multiple different ways because we all kind of do our own thing, and we're all comfortable doing things a certain way. So that's kind of worked in some instances. Some it doesn't. But I think most recently I really explored using Loom, which is a video recording / screen sharing tool that you can share your screen, walk through the actual process, and talk through it as well. And I've found that doing that and kind of showing, not telling, has been working really well for me. It takes not a lot of time on my side of things. And hopefully for those that are, watching and listening to me walking through the process, it almost acts like I'm kind of right there sitting right next to them, which, as we all know, in a remote agency setting, we don't have a lot of that shoulder to shoulder, same office time. So the video recording, and specifically with a tool like Loom, has been working really, really well, at least for the moment. Who knows, in the future, there might be even a better way. But that's what I've found recently that's really helping the showing and not necessarily just telling.
And do you do that? Do you do the Loom videos while you're doing the task? Like, okay, I'm going to do this thing, so I'm going to Loom it and talk through it, and then somebody can come behind me and do the next one? Or do you sort of carve out specific time and walk through a specific thing that maybe is in a, sort of modeling format opposed to doing actually completing a task?
Yeah, well, with MKG, everyone on our team, we like to say that we're really transparent. So I will actually record myself doing the process at that time, and not necessarily doing the process and then figuring, okay, now I need to redo it and record myself in kind of the best way possible. So I found that recording myself, going through it kind of the first time, and that also means making some mistakes. And I think showing that human element is almost always actually a really good thing. Um, my recordings are not perfect, and I never tell like an individual that I'm sending a recording, hey, this is a really great recording. This is a perfect recording about how to do this specific tactic or process. It's important that you show that human element, because it could also really help that the person that's watching it and trying to learn from it, they could also make a very similar to mistake that you just displayed in the video. So I think showing some of those errors is a really good thing. So I tend to do it, if I'm thinking about the tasks I have in front of me, and if this is going to be a task that I need to perform, on an ongoing basis, or maybe hand down to a strategist, or even show another SEO director on our team, I'm going to record myself doing it, and I'm going to be okay, mistakes and warts and all. I think that's just infinitely more value than having me try to make the perfect screen share video.
Well, I'm a big fan, and I love that you've taken this on and have done it. And today I talked to Jonathan Ronzio, who you actually listened to this podcast of me and Jonathan hashing it out, where they actually went and created this product called Trainual, where it's all about going through a task, videoing it as you're doing it, sharing your screen, walking people through it, and then having a one-stop shop, so to speak, of them being able to walk somebody start to finish through a project and them being able to go do it without you sitting there and physically walking them through it. And it's really cool to see how you basically did that without ever even listening to what Jonathan's got going on or learning about Trainual, and then just now being able to take that to the next step, because I think Jonathan had some really sharp things to say, and I'm excited to see where you go next. So let's take a listen to my conversation with Jonathan Ronzio, CMO of Trainual. Jonathan, thank you for joining me.
Carrie, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be on the show and chat about this. I think I know based on just our podcast prep conversations, this is something you're super passionate about too. So I think it's going to be fun.
It is. And it's actually something after our conversation, I actually put some of these things to the test. I was like, well, maybe I should go try and write down my own processes and create some Loom videos and see if my intern can help me out. And let me tell you, it's been pretty magical. So I'm excited about sharing our conversation with our listeners and getting them on board with the magic of training and process.
Awesome.
Do it.
I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So the challenge you're basically trying to solve is helping people onboard quicker, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically trying to make business as easy as possible. It's like trying to organize the chaos of growing your business. Like how to make it more simple to go from, you had an idea, you took action on it, you got your first clients, you got some social proof, you built out a scalable, repeatable way to generate revenue. And then what? Then you have to actually build a team that's going to execute on things that up to that point was just you doing it. And that's often the hardest thing in the world for so many entrepreneurs and small business owners starting out, is trying to figure out how to get the magic of what they do, how to pull it out of their brains and give it to somebody else, and be able to systematically explain how you do what you do so that you can kind of work your way out of one job at a time. And you can't do the doing forever. No, you can't. I mean, some people really want to be the operator or the producer forever and really like being on the front lines, but probably most business, leaders, managers, owners want to continue to grow and get something started and then get it off their plate so they can work on bigger challenges. And yeah, I mean, documenting those systems and processes along the way is the easiest thing you can do to make that happen. And really it comes down to time, right? If you can have somebody help you
do some of the doing, then the productivity increases exponentially, opposed to you being that funnel where everything has to go up through and or you doing the actual doing, right? You can't do it all forever. Essentially, there's got to be some things you can get help with.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there will come a inflection point where you have to move from player to coach, and that's a challenge. But like, it really is. It's about time and productivity and scalability, because how are you going to build your business when like everything you do is tied to your time? And like, let's say you're a marketing consultant, which I have been in years past, and I was working on like content and brand strategy and building out editorial calendars and running social media and writing blogs and sending newsletters and doing all those things for like many different clients. And it just got to the point where it was like, well, I'm at my cap. This is as much as I can take on. And unless I like hire and train somebody else to do the, editorial calendar and the newsletters and the blogging, et cetera, like, how am I going to ever grow this beyond what I can currently produce?
Yeah, and I actually just took that on too. If we are about to hire 2 new people who are literally starting in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and I was starting their onboarding process, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's just step after step after step here, and I can't always do this forever. I mean, it took me a whole day to get somebody set up into all of our systems and processes yesterday, and I was like, there's got to be a better way. And I actually was like, I'm going to document this for my intern, and I'm going to have her, because she's also 2 hours ahead of me, so I'm like, I'm going to have her get some of this up and running. I created a lot of templates so she can duplicate stuff, and then she's just got to tweak it opposed to building it from scratch. So I definitely took the work that I did yesterday and figured out how to essentially scale it, and then getting her to help me do it, created her a Loom video. And I was like, okay, I have to relinquish some of the control here and get some help so that we can onboard people much quicker than just me. Because if hiring 2 people is no big deal, but what if it becomes 5? What if it becomes 10? It can't just be me anymore.
Right. And the earlier that you take that kind of proactive approach, the easier you make it on yourself in the long term. Like for me, that like Loom is such a great tool, and that was really like the earliest thing that made like training and teaching people how to do what I was doing like accessible. And the passion for it kind of, at the same time I was thinking about how do I scale what I'm doing and not be the producer all the time. As much as I was thinking about that, I was also thinking about freedom, right? And at the end of the day, you want more time to do the things you love. And for me, I've spent about a decade as like a mountaineer and outdoor adventure athlete and content creator in that industry. And like, while I was doing all the marketing consulting, there were points where I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go to Alaska for a month, and what happens with all the client work, and what happens with my blog, and et cetera. And so I had to like legitimately just, and I used Loom, and I like recorded videos as I was doing it. And that's, I think for me, the easiest way to do it is like, okay, I have to like write this blog, or like set up this newsletter, or queue up this post, or, get this podcast ready. Here's the process. As I'm doing it, might as well record it and kind of like talk through basically like a live narration of exactly like what I'm doing step by step. And then bam, I've got that video, and I can give it to, the contract person or whoever on my team that needs to keep that moving when I'm off climbing.
Let's take something like that, for instance, right? Let's take posting a blog post as an example. I think it's a really good example. I just did something similar. It's a lot of steps though, right? And there's a lot of like sort of build up to even being able to publish a blog post. So when you're going through that process, do you do it all in one go, or do you break it down into smaller videos? Talk me through how you actually go about creating some of this training material. What's the process?
If you're just getting started, the easiest way to not overthink it is just to record the whole process. Like, like the more you think about how to do this, the more daunting it becomes. And so if you just need to teach something, like literally actually yesterday morning, I was recording like how to publish my podcast so that like I could, have somebody else on my team do all the show notes and get the podcast up every week.
That's what I did.
Yeah. So, all right in line. And with that, it was just a matter of like, I only had a limited amount of time, and just like the easiest way to do it was just for me to hit like record, and like used to do this in Loom, but now we actually with Trainual, my company, we have a in-app like built-in screen recorder that just adds it to your training step. So yeah, love Loom, but now do it in Trainual. And I just hit record, and just then kind of just went through all the different tabs and was like, okay, now you duplicate that post, and now you're going to change the intro, you're going to change the title, you're going to change the Yoast SEO metadata, you're going to change the feature image, you're going to add the correct tags, you're going to schedule the X, Y, and Z. Like I just kind of just went through everything. If you're on kind of a time crunch and you just need to make it happen, then do it, make it happen.
What if you like, and this happens to me all the time, I'll be in the middle of something, like, oh, I don't have this right asset. Like something will go wrong where I'll need to go get something, or I'll do something wrong. Do you just keep recording and they get to see all sort of the mix-ups, or do you start over? Like what happens when things don't go quite as smoothly as you had anticipated when you start recording?
I mean, I really don't worry about it. If like I mess up a step, I just kind of talk about like, all right, well, don't do that. And actually let's do like, I try not to be, like overcritical of myself. And I think that that's just a good practice for anything, whether you're prepping for like public speaking or training somebody, or,
Sure.
Don't be too hard on yourself. Just get it done. And you can always finesse later and redo something after once you're a little more comfortable with it. But don't let that like perfectionism stop you from doing it. But
Yeah, or if you have to go off and get something, then go off and get it and be like, oh, hold on, let me grab that link for you. Or you're going to have this in your task, so this is where it would go. And sort of just, even if you get going and you're like, I don't really have all the things I need to do this, you can sort of, there's things you can do to keep it going and fill in the blanks sort of later, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, you can like for instance, I was saying like, I didn't actually want somebody to sit there and waste the time watching me think about like the intro copy for the show notes post that I was going to write. But I was just like, all right, this is where you're going to write the intro. Like check the next step after you watch the video to see like what the final outcome of the written narrative looks like for a writing example. Right.
Right.
So you can kind of understand where you can save some time and skip through that and just say like, hey, check the next step, or check the notes in the Google Doc or wherever you're, training to like reference what I'm talking about here. So it doesn't all have to be perfect in the video, but that's just, in my opinion, the simplest way to get started. If I'm going to like go back and finesse that later to make it, best practice that's a little more polished, then yeah, I think the best way to probably do it, if you have the time and the focus and attention, is like, here's the production and recording process. Here's creating like the imagery, and here's the tone and voice examples, and here's the next step is like editing the actual blog and the metadata, and then the next step is like scheduling for social media and promotion. And breaking those up, it makes it like a little more digestible. It's the same way that like when you write a blog, you don't necessarily want like giant walls of text. You want to have a line break every 2 to 3 sentences so that when somebody's going through it, it feels like just easier to digest.
Right. So if you're going to do a big long, like not just posting a blog post, but if you're going to actually talk about how to do it from taking the raw recording to editing that to publishing it on whichever casting system you use, to then bringing that into a blog, and then to launching that and doing social, then yes, there's definitely steps there that I think would be useful. The way that I would approach it is essentially is to actually write those out, not all the steps that go with them, but just say, okay, here are the videos I essentially need to create, and then sort of just to create a checklist and then go do the videos. Like don't try and you can almost write the steps afterwards. I do find that like yesterday I used the wrong system to show this person how to get a link from somewhere. And so instead of going back in and redoing the whole video or doing another video to show how just to correct that one thing, it was 4 steps. So I just wrote them out and I said, you're going to get to this section. This is the wrong page. Go to this page, follow these steps, and you're out the door. So I think there's definitely sort of, when you're getting going, there's definitely some ad hoc things you can do. But the point is that it sounds like both of us are trying to make Jonathan is you just got to get going.
It's just do it. Yeah. I think that really is it. It's like when you're just starting out, make it as easy for you as possible to document what you do, whether that's through voice or video or writing, step-by-step processes, if that's your jam. Just think about, how do I make this as easy as possible, and as like, so that it doesn't feel like a chore or homework or whatever. How do I just get this done now? As your business grows and you get to the point where like you have, more departments at scale, or like, let's say you're in HR or training or learning and development, like when you're there, then your framework shifts a little bit. And it's like, now how do I make this as easy as possible for the learner, for the person that has to be trained? Like, what's going to be the most accessible thing for them? Is it a video for this process? Is it step-by-step written instructions? Is it screenshots? Is it GIFs and images just to make it fun? Is it like audio clips? Like, then you start thinking, how do I make it easy for people to go through this and learn as fast and as easy as possible? But just getting going, yeah, it's about how do you pull the knowledge out of your brain as quick and easy as possible, so that you can start to at least proactively get this going.
And anybody can really do this, right? In terms of scaling a team, we mentioned a few types of people, like HR, training, onboarding. But I mean, even if you're a manager, right? And let's say a company brings you on as a manager right out of the gate. Now you got to go build a team. Well, while you're building a team, you probably got to do the work. So while you're starting to do the work, if you start documenting it right now, when you bring on that new hire, that process is going to be 1,000 times easier in getting them up to speed as quickly as possible, so you can do less and get them to do some of the work and offload that for you.
The fact is, like, everybody in every business, any employee anywhere, has to be taught how to do something. Like, maybe they have the skill set that you need, so that's why you hired them, but there is a certain way that your company does things, that you have a process for. Maybe different tools, etc. Like, everybody has to learn something. And that's why instruction manuals or employee handbooks or ops manuals exist. That's why, you build Legos with step-by-step instructions, and your business shouldn't be any different. Like, you should give people a way to do things. And that's why manuals have been a thing. But the fact is, like, most people don't read the employee handbook or the training manual, and those, if they're printed or in a binder or whatever, get like super out of date. And fortunately today we have, easy free options like Loom or Google Docs. But like, as you're scaling your business, that those can often, they work really great early on to get going, but then they kind of can be a little bit scattered and chaotic as well. So there's like right times for right tools. And I guess at the heart of it is, it's just revolution beyond the printed manual, right?
Yes. And I think that's where video's super powerful, and screen sharing. Like, I actually did so we're starting to document some of our core processes. One of our values at MKG is to uphold the MKG standard. We hired like 4 or 5 people initially who really created what it means to work with MKG as a client. And we've actually developed that into a value. And so as we grow, how do we maintain that as and for people to actually uphold it as you bring in new people who have different opinions, who have different skill sets? And I actually sat down with one of our SEO experts and I said, okay, teach me how to do keyword research. And we did a Zoom video where we screen shared, and he walked me through how to do keyword research. And it was more of an interview process, which was actually kind of nice. And then we recorded it and we uploaded it to our intranet. So now anybody can learn how to do keyword research, essentially the MKG way. And that's just like another way too. Like, if you have somebody on your team who's really good at something and you need to get it down, video is another way to sort of accomplish that through an interview. Because I think that's another point too. Like, how do you get someone on your team who's really busy to essentially go through this process and make that happen for you? Again, you can't do all the work. I'm not an SEO expert. I can't teach somebody how to do keyword research, but I needed Christian to show me. So like, that's one way of getting somebody to help you to create some of these processes. Jonathan, do you have any other suggestions on how to like help the team support you in creating and documenting these processes that are out of your skill set?
Yeah, I mean, crowdsourcing things is like such a good way to get started. If you do have a team already, we've had clients at Trainual say that they've actually just made it like an actual project, like, just like it's a client project at an agency. They've just like said, all right, this month we're having, it's a documentation challenge, and everybody dedicates 1 hour of every week to document one process of something that they work on. And it's like the team is like, you know, accountable to each other to, by the end of the month, they've all built, stuff together inside of their manual. It's funny that you said like finding a way to what was it, like somebody who's really good at doing something and finding a way to like have them teach others or like replicate what
Yeah.
they're doing. Because early on, like the DNA of kind of the methodology behind Trainual was that like my brother used to, like, he before this was doing small business consulting, and like I said, I before this was doing a lot of just marketing and adventure media and climbing and traveling. And he used to have me take like personality tests so he could try to figure out how to hire people like me that worked the way I did, because he always wanted to like figure out how I can replicate Jonathan, and he wanted to like loop me into his like small business world, and I just wanted to go like climb the biggest mountains in the world. And we ended up like, aligning on launching the software tool, and it's like been a blast since we've been growing this together. But yeah, that was a joke early on. And then like just walking down the street after an event in San Diego one time, we just like put the iPhone out in front of us and filmed a 15-second commentary on that concept of like why you want to clone yourself or somebody who's the best in your company. And we ran that as like one of our early Instagram ads, and just like it converted new customers like fire. It was unbelievable.
That's
That,
so funny.
but that,
I wanted to do the same thing. I hired Christian, and then I was like, Christian, like, how do I clone you? And he's like, well, I do have a twin brother. It's funny enough.
yeah, right. But
Totally hired a twin
that
brother.
message resonates with people. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, of course, if an entrepreneur wants to, if you could, you would just clone yourself, because you know that you do like great work in these kinds of things. And yeah, you're going to hire for where you're weak, but you want to be able to replicate your best people and best processes. And, we keep circling back, but this is like documenting or recording or just like,
Getting it down.
memorializing your processes is the easiest way to do that.
It really is. And it helps you grow pretty quickly. So you mentioned that by building systems and processes and documenting the stuff and getting it down actually cuts 75% of onboarding and training.
Yeah, that's what we've got thousands of users now in over 100 countries. And that's like the stat that we've found in all of our research with all the accounts. And that's come out of it, is that like people are cutting their onboarding and training time by 75%, which makes a massive impact. It's like if you're senior managers who are, on average, maybe they're making $60,000-$70,000 a year. And like you divide that out by their like billable time. And if they can spend 75% less time like teaching the basics over and over to the new person, then they're spending more of that time on actually like productive growing the business, challenges, strategies, creative direction, etc. And you're allowing your system to actually like teach the person your purpose, your mission, your core values, your industry and market positioning, about the team and who does what, about the tech tools that you use, etc. Right? It's like you don't have to go face to face to like communicate that knowledge. There's stuff that you should do face to face, like when it comes to like really role specific stuff, or there's a point to that. Like we don't want to make training humanless, but there's just a way to make it more efficient, and that's what we've found.
Yeah, I actually have I use Asana, and
Love Asana.
oh my gosh, I love Asana. And I create one master task and then a whole bunch of subtasks on basically how to set your machine up, right? From literally opening your computer to installing all the apps you need to how to sign into everything, so on and so forth. Because I'm on the West Coast and I hire people who are not in my time zone, right? And I can't get up at 7 a.m. to onboard them. I'm not a morning person. That's not going to be good for anybody. And I don't want them to wait for me to get on at 9, right? Because that's noon their time. They just lost half a day. So I have figured out how to use Asana to actually basically people onboard themselves in a whole morning. And then when I jump on, I answer any questions they had. I make sure that if they stumbled anywhere, we fix it and get it done. And then I get to walk them through the fun stuff, which is our mission, our vision, who we are, where we're going, what our values are. I get to talk about code of conduct, which I think is really important. And then I can spend HR time on like what I really need to be talking about and not how to set up your machine. I also want to think that people are pretty tech savvy these days and can take it upon themselves to, you know, get through that stuff without essentially needing somebody to sit by them and do it. But
you would hope so. You would assume so, but that's not always the case. I think actually a good like filter question in an interview I've found, which I mean there might be some like strong opinions about this on different directions, but I always like wonder if somebody uses like Safari or Chrome, or if they like, because that's like a prime example of like, do you use just the thing that was put in front of you,
right?
Or do you go a little bit above and beyond to like try something new that might be better? Do you look for the tool that could be better? Like just
like
that,
that.
just that kind of user behavior, right? Like which browser you use, or and you can ask that about you know, all sorts of things, which apps, etc.
It's funny. I was, you know, when I look through people when they apply and I look at their email addresses, if they use Yahoo or Hotmail, I don't say no to them, but I do sort of like squint and go, really? Like,
yep.
Are you up to snuff on all the latest and greatest tech? Because it doesn't, just looking at your email address, it feels like maybe you're a little behind the times.
Right.
But it does make you think about that.
It's funny how tools and apps and all that can have that perception, but it's true. That's what I just think that's like a psychological, like descriptive thing that like people just don't even realize going into an interview or on their skills. It's like how do you approach problems? Are you proactively looking for the newer or better or easier or more efficient thing, or are you just like, well, it doesn't work?
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, that's definitely such a good point. And I think when you're looking at sort of these new tools like Trainual, like even using something like Loom and Asana, it is, people do have to have some sort of, I mean, we're a distributed company, and so our people work all over the country, and we have 2 offices, but they're more co-working spaces. And so it is really important to us and to companies like us that we have people who are self-starters essentially. And part of being a self-starter is using the latest and greatest tech and finding the intuitiveness of those tools and not being afraid to use them. I think is a really good point.
So what are you doing as a dispersed team? Like what you know, your top tips for keeping your remote teams aligned? Because this is like a hot topic for me. I like talk about it all the time, because going all the way back to just like when I was doing, you know, adventure marketing content and kind of going all off around the world on all these different adventures and having to keep stuff moving. And now like I'm based in Boston, but the majority of the Trainual team is in Scottsdale, Arizona. So I'm now gone from like digital nomad to like remote leader.
I actually just did a podcast with Marissa Levine and her co-founder, and it's the Culture Podcast. So I'm just going to say, check out the Culture Podcast and listen for it. I do a whole interview around exactly that, Jonathan, with them, and it's got some good tips and tricks in there. But it's essentially being connected and having open transparency and accountability through everything you do. So yeah, check it out. Little right. Plug there for the Culture Podcast. This was awesome, Jonathan. I think in wrapping this up and just coming back to really what we talked about when it comes to systems and process and documenting your training materials, it's all about time, right? We're all looking at the clock. We only have ideally 8 hours of working time a day, and you really want to maximize that. So in duplicating yourself, essentially, the best way to do that is to write down what you're doing, or to video it, or to show it in Giphies, however you need to get it done, to basically say, this is how I approach something, this is how I do it, and now please, other person, help me in going and doing these things for me.
Yeah. So I know that you mentioned that you were going through EOS and that you had read Traction, and so like along the whole guidelines of systems and processes, and I think it's like actually it's within Traction. I think the fifth step being process, and they talk about like Michael Gerber's E-Myth and building the franchise prototype. So fun fact, Michael Gerber is actually on the Trainual advisor team, and we work with him a lot. And so I wanted, like, for anybody who's like getting into systems and processes and thinking about like whether that you're using Loom or Google Docs or Asana or Trainual or whatever it is to do this. And a quick note on like, I like to think about Asana as like to-dos, whereas like Trainual or wherever else you have your processes like Google Docs being more of like your how-tos. But along the E-Myth, if you just go to trainual.com/emyth, you can grab like the chapter on like, I think what is it? It's working on your business, not in it. And that's that whole like foundational part of that book about like learning to build the franchise prototype and work yourself beyond being the operator.
It's so true. I wish I found this book 5 years ago. We've been in business for almost 8 years now. I'm like, how have been doing this for almost 8 years? And I'm just now starting to put down my core processes and video this and get this into the hands of my team. Like, it's mind-boggling. If you haven't picked up Traction or something like it, it is definitely worth looking at a framework to help you scale your business. It's
so good. And then I guess the other thing is just a free thing for your listeners too is trainual.com/MKG. And it's just like, you don't have to enter any kind of email or whatever. It's just, you're going to get it. And it's just a simple PDF that's 9 steps to organizing the chaos in your business. And just like a really, really basic, but awesome framework that like we put together of how we organize chaos.
What a treat, Jonathan. That's so exciting. I'm going to go download it right now.
There you go.
Let's get on that, listeners. Trainual.com/MKG podcast.
No, just for MKG. That's all. Trainual.com/MKG. And if you are going to go down the systems and process rabbit hole like Carrie has, and I have, you can also check out the Process Makes Perfect podcast that my brother Chris hosts. That's it's like he talks to, Michael Gerber and Dan Martell and all the different systems gurus out there.
That is awesome. I'm going to go subscribe to that right now too. And I hope my listeners do the same. Thank you, Jonathan. This has been awesome. And I can't wait to get this out into the world.
Absolutely, Carrie. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, that was my conversation with Jonathan. Christian, we did this. We did it. Yeah. Well, it was a little different. We did it live, but we still recorded it.
Right.
But you walked me through how to do keyword research.
Yeah, that's right.
And I got to say, I feel like a pro. I feel like I could go and do keyword research now, just like you would. And I found it really helpful in that it was nice to do it live because I could ask you questions as we went. But now that it's recorded, anybody can go watch it and learn how to do keyword research. And it wasn't duplicate work for either of us.
Right.
It felt really natural and easy. Mm-hmm. And I think exactly what you said in the beginning of this podcast of being able to do something in the moment without having to stop and write a script and record it and then, get it out there and making mistakes is okay. Mm-hmm. And Jonathan said that, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He basically said it's okay not to have a perfect take, right? When you're recording something, mistakes happen. And if I recall, Carrie, during that keyword research video that we recorded together, there was a couple of stoppages where you asked a really great question, and I didn't really have a great answer. And I think we pretty much kind of bookmarked a couple of those spots in the video to basically say, hey, how can we improve upon something in something that you saw on the platform? I didn't have the best answer for it. Okay, let's go back after we're done recording, obviously, and figure this out and see, okay, how can I answer that question for Carrie? And is it going to make the process better? Great. Maybe that means, a couple months down the line, I've incorporated that just because of you asking a question and it's made the process better. Let's record another video. So I think there's also a delicate balance, right? I think you did a really great job when we went through that video of stopping the line a couple times, asking a couple of great questions. But because it was a process video, you weren't doing that like every minute, right? Because that would just balloon that video to, let's say over 30 minutes, which does someone want to sit through a 30-minute video? Probably not.
No.
So like you said, I think a perfect take isn't something that we should try to achieve, but I think it's okay to ask a couple questions, not have the right answers, but not to really necessarily pepper the entire take with, couple of divergence here, a couple of side conversations over there. Absolutely just keep on kind of what's the end goal of this process video and trying to get through it in a timely fashion.
Yes, I think that's a really important point. I think the other, in talking about timely fashion, I think the other thing to note too is you don't want to try and take a giant project and try and show it start to finish all in one go across multiple hours. I think breaking it down into, these smaller tasks is really what makes it powerful. We just did keyword research, which is part of a way bigger project. You never just want to turn around and be like, I've done keyword research. Here you go, client.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of other steps that need to follow that. And I think that's what Trainual does really well, is it actually allows you to create an entire project, break things down into smaller steps, and train somebody start to finish. So if you liked learning from Jonathan about Trainual and training videos and just getting started, you could definitely check out Trainual. You can check out Loom. You can check out, we did it over Zoom. We shared our screen, we recorded it, downloaded it, uploaded it. Really, the tool doesn't matter. It matters that you get started. And then if you need something bigger and you need something more robust, then Trainual is definitely a great place to go. Check out trainual.com. You can always connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn. Thank you for listening to the MKG podcast, the podcast that helps marketers grow their businesses using the 4 M's, the right means, messaging, media, and measurement. I'm your host, Carrie Yard, and until next time.